He looked me dead in the eyes. His voice was calm, almost soft, but the words struck like a hammer. "There's no room for you here. No anger, no fight. Just a simple, cold sentence." I smiled. Not bitter, not desperate, just quietly steady. I nodded once, turned my back, and walked away. What he didn't know was this: by the time the sun rose, everything would change. The house, the one he thought was his alone, was half mine, and I held the key to the reckoning that was coming. It started like any other day. I packed 2 battered suitcases, a folded blanket, and a framed photo of the man I once loved, my husband, gone but never forgotten. I had just handed my son the life insurance money, 180,000 euros left by his father. "This is for your future," I told him. Jonas had just married Maria, a woman I barely knew. They dreamed of a big house, 4 bedrooms, quiet streets just outside the city. The bank said no to their full loan. So, I stepped in. Maria hugged me tight, her eyes sparkling. "You'll always have a place with us," she promised. Jonas kissed my cheek, whispering, "You'll never have to work another day." The house was bright, too bright, sterile and cold. Echoes filled the empty halls, like memories waiting to be forgotten. My room was small, tucked away downstairs, the guest room with no closet, a tiny bathroom missing a shower. I said nothing. I was just grateful to hear footsteps in the morning again. Jonas made coffee. Maria showed me how to use the smart thermostat, though her patience thinned quickly. One evening we ate dinner together. Then the cracks appeared. Maria laughed with her friends. She lives with 2 kids and a grandmother. Jonas frowned when I asked if I could put a shelf in the laundry room. Locks went on the top fridge. Maria's special diet. The Wi-Fi router vanished into the office. For 3 days I had no Netflix. One night I overheard Maria on the phone. "She's nice," she whispered, "but we need our own lives. This can't continue." I stayed silent. I cooked, I cleaned, I gave them space. I smiled when Maria said she wanted to turn the office into a nursery. But then I heard the truth. One morning, on my way for tea, I caught Jonas's voice. "She won't leave if we're nice. We have to push her out without a fight." Maria's answer was cold. "If she's uncomfortable, she'll give up her share. Make her uncomfortable. She'll leave on her own." I froze, my eyes fixed on the wallpaper. I had chosen just days before. My son, the boy I raised, was plotting to cast me out for a nursery, for more space, for convenience. That night, I cooked his favorite meal, chicken Alfredo. No one came down. Maria said she'd already eaten. Jonas muttered something about work and stayed upstairs. I ate slowly, alone, thinking of every sacrifice, every scraped knee, every night spent soothing his fears. And now, I was a problem. But they didn't know one thing. This house was not just their dream. It was a ticking time bomb, and I held the fuse. My name is Elise. For most of my life, I was a wife, a mother, and a quiet supporter of the family I loved. Johannes, my husband, was a man of gentle strength. We built a life together filled with small joys, a garden bursting with roses, a kitchen warm with the smell of fresh bread, an evening spent talking under soft lamplight. When he passed away unexpectedly, the world I knew shifted beneath my feet. Yet even in that darkest hour, I held on to hope for myself, but mostly for our son, Jonas. Jonas was my greatest pride. From the moment he was born, he carried in him a spark that no challenge could extinguish. I remember his first steps, unsteady but determined, just like the man he was becoming. He grew up surrounded by love and lessons how to stand tall, how to be kind, how to protect those you care about. As he grew older, he met Maria, a woman with an easy smile and a quiet ambition. They married quickly, their dreams entwining with the promise of a future filled with possibility. They wanted a home, a place to build their own family, a house with 4 bedrooms in a quiet suburb, where laughter could fill every room. I was happy for them, more than happy. I wanted to help. So when the bank denied them the full loan, I offered what I could. The life insurance money Johannes had left. It wasn't just money. It was a symbol of everything Johannes and I had worked for. It was a gift, a trust placed in Jonas to build a future, not just for himself, but for all of us. The house they chose was modern and pristine. White walls that gleamed under bright lights, floors smooth and cool beneath your feet, the kind of place you could admire, but it didn't quite feel like home, not yet. My room was at the bottom of the stairs, small, with just enough space for a bed and a few belongings. The bathroom was tiny, without a proper shower, but it was my space, a quiet corner where I could still feel part of the family. The days started with the scent of fresh coffee. Jonas would make it each morning, a small act of kindness that reminded me of the boy who once needed me so much. Maria tried to include me, showing me how to adjust the new thermostat or find my way around the smart home system, though impatience sometimes crept into her voice. We shared meals occasionally, smiles exchanged over dinner plates, though the warmth was fragile, like ice ready to crack. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Small things that didn't quite add up. Maria's laughter with her friends, echoing just a bit too loud as she made jokes at my expense. She lives with 2 kids and a grandmother, she said once, and the words stung more than I expected. Jonas's frown when I asked to put a shelf in the laundry room. A tiny request, but one that felt like an invasion. Locks on the fridge doors, moved Wi-Fi routers, lost access to simple comforts, like Netflix little signs that the house was becoming less mine with each passing day. One night, I overheard Maria on the phone, her voice low and secretive. "She's nice, but we need our own lives," she said. "This can't go on." I stayed quiet. I cooked, I cleaned, I tried to give them space, hoping that time would heal the growing distance. I told myself it was just a phase, that love and family would find their way back. But deep down, a cold knot of doubt was tightening in my chest. At first, the changes were subtle, almost invisible to anyone but me. The smiles became forced, the warmth a little colder. Maria's polite gestures were often laced with impatience, and Jonas's once gentle eyes now carried a shadow I couldn't place. I tried to hold on to the small routines, the morning coffee Jonas made, the occasional dinners we shared, but even those moments grew strained. One afternoon I asked if I could add a shelf in the laundry room. It was a simple request, a practical one. Jonas's brow furrowed. He said it wasn't necessary. His voice was clipped, almost sharp. It felt like a door closing quietly, but firmly in my face. Then came the lock. First, on the upper fridge, Maria said it was because of her special diet. Next, the Wi-Fi router disappeared from the living room and reappeared in their office, cutting off my connection for days. I found myself sitting in silence, unable to watch the shows I loved, isolated in a space that was supposed to be my home. Maria's words to her friends pierced me one night when I overheard her laughter and cruel joke. "She lives with 2 kids and a grandmother," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The phrase echoed in my mind, turning warmth into cold isolation. I thought of the sacrifices I had made, how I had given my life to raise Jonas, to provide for him, and now I was the outsider. One evening I overheard a conversation that chilled me to my bones. Maria's voice, hushed but clear, spoke on the phone. "She's nice, but we need our own lives. This can't go on." The words settled like a heavy fog around me. I didn't respond. I didn't confront. Instead, I cleaned the kitchen, folded towels, and tried to keep the peace. I told myself to be patient, that love would prevail. But the quiet moments of kindness were quickly overshadowed by growing exclusion. The nursery was the final sign, a symbol of their future, one that didn't include me. Maria announced her plan to convert the downstairs office into a baby's room. I smiled on the outside. Inside, a cold dread took root. One morning, as I went to make tea, I overheard Jonas's voice, sharp and resolute. "She won't leave if we're nice. We have to push her out without a fight." Maria's reply was ruthless. "If she feels uncomfortable, she'll give up her share. Make her uncomfortable, she'll leave on her own." I stopped, my eyes fixed on the wallpaper I had picked just days before. Now a reminder of how little space I had left. The son I had raised, the boy who once clung to me, was now part of a plan to erase me. For convenience, for comfort, for their future. That night, I cooked Jonas's favorite meal, chicken Alfredo. No one came down. Maria said she'd already eaten. Jonas muttered something about work and stayed upstairs. I ate alone, slowly thinking of every scraped knee I had kissed, Every late night I had spent comforting him. And now, I was a problem they wanted to remove. But they didn't know. I was ready. This section builds the emotion. The morning dawned quietly, but the atmosphere felt heavy as if the air itself was weighed down by things left unsaid. I was rinsing cherries in the faded kitchen sink when Claudia entered, arms crossed, a cold smile barely hiding the sharp edge beneath. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice smooth but laced with something icy. "We think it's time you found a place that suits you better." Before I could speak, my son Lucas appeared, holding a steaming mug as though everything was perfectly normal. "There's no room for you here anymore, Mom," he said without meeting my gaze. "You need to leave." I slowly dried my hands, turned toward them both, and smiled. Not a bitter smile, just steady, calm. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll go tonight." Claudia was silent, stunned. Lucas gave a curt nod, like ticking off a completed chore. "Thanks, Mom," he said, then walked away. I retreated to my small room and began packing clothes. An old photo of my late husband Eric, a worn journal, and a crimson folder I kept tucked away in my suitcase. That folder held the deed to our home. My name was there, right beside Lucas's. Nearly half the house was mine. They thought they could force me out, but they hadn't counted on this. I called a cab and left without a backward glance. The ride to the motel was silent, except for the steady grip I kept on the folder, its weight, a reminder of the battle ahead. I had reserved the room a week earlier, not out of fear, but because something deep within urged me to be ready. The motel was humble, worn down threadbare carpet, flickering lights, and a faint smell of fried food lingering in the halls. I paid cash for 3 nights and asked not to be disturbed that night. Lying stiff on the lumpy mattress, the folder pressed to my chest like armor, I felt no rage, only quiet determination. The following morning I printed 5 copies of the deed, one for me, one for my attorney, and 3 to have proof ready, if needed. Sipping my coffee, the phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Anders." A man's voice asked. "This is Herr Weber from Northbridge Credit Services. You're listed as co-owner of the property at Elm Street." My pulse slowed. "Yes," I replied carefully. "Is there an issue?" Herr Weber cleared his throat. "There's been a payment default. Your son, Mr. Lucas Anders, took a business loan using the house as security. He has missed payments for months. We've sent multiple warnings," he added. "If the loan isn't paid, foreclosure proceedings will start this Friday." I remained composed, asking for details. Lucas had borrowed money to fund a startup marketing company that folded within months. Claudia either wasn't aware or chose to ignore it. Both possibilities made my stomach churn. Herr Weber was polite but firm. I had 3 options: settle the debt, let foreclosure proceed, or surrender my share and allow the sale. I requested the documents be emailed. When they arrived, I printed them, took the same blue pen I'd used to sign Lucas's school permission slips, and signed every page slowly and purposefully. I scanned and sent them back an hour later. Herr Weber called. "We're moving forward with the foreclosure." I said nothing and ended the call. Soon, Lucas would learn what it meant to be evicted without warning. I told no one, posted nothing, did not cry or call my sister. I sat alone in that motel room, listening to the silence I hadn't known in years. Later, I walked to a corner shop and bought peanut butter, crackers, instant coffee, and a small bottle of wine. That night, I raised my glass not for revenge, but because I finally accepted they no longer saw me as family. It was time to see myself as someone worthy. Days passed quietly in the motel room, but behind the stillness, a storm was gathering. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was focused. With the deed safely in my possession, I reached out quietly, enlisting a trusted lawyer to prepare for what was coming. They had pushed me out, tried to erase me, but I held the power to make them face the consequences. Word spread slowly at first, whispers among neighbors and friends, then louder murmurs on social media. Maria and Lucas tried to control the narrative. They painted me as the villain, a bitter mother who schemed to ruin their lives. But the truth, backed by documents and facts, was harder to dismiss. I shared copies of the foreclosure notices, the loan agreements, and proof of my rightful ownership with key people, old friends, relatives, even a local journalist who had shown genuine interest in telling my side. The story took on a life of its own. Comments flooded in, some offering support, others skeptical, but none able to ignore the facts. Maria posted tearful videos, blaming me for the family's downfall. She called it betrayal, manipulation, cruelty. But behind the scenes, the cracks in their story began to show. Friends, who once stood silently by, started to ask questions. Neighbors shared quiet truths about the financial strain Lucas's business had caused. Even distant relatives reached out, unsure what to believe. But wanting to hear my side, through it all, I stayed quiet, publicly letting the truth speak louder than any outburst or accusation. I wasn't interested in a fight. I wanted justice. The foreclosure notice appeared on the door of the house they still lived in, bright orange, impossible to ignore. The eviction was no longer a threat, it was inevitable. Maria posted desperate pleas for help online, tagging lawyers, friends, anyone who might save them. But the foundation they'd built on lies was crumbling. Lucas's friends messaged me privately, confused and unsure, some even offering sympathy. The son who had once promised me forever now faced the harsh reality of his decisions. And I sat quietly in my motel room, watching it all unfold, neither gloating nor grieving. This wasn't revenge, it was a reckoning they had brought upon themselves. And through it all, I found a strange peace, from victory, but from knowing I stood firm in the truth. They had tried to erase me, but I was still here, stronger than before, and no longer invisible. Sitting alone in the quiet of the motel room, I allowed myself to feel the weight of everything, the heartbreak, the sacrifices, the love that had carried me through so many years. Raising Jonas had been the greatest joy of my life. From his first breath to his first steps, every moment was etched deep into my heart. I remembered the nights I stayed awake, soothing his fears, the scraped knees I kissed better, the countless school events I never missed. I had given him everything. I could, the best I had, and yet, somehow, that wasn't enough. I thought about the house, the family dinners, the promises made with smiles and kisses, promises that now felt like echoes in empty rooms. It wasn't anger that filled me, though there was plenty of that beneath the surface. It was a quiet, aching sadness, the sadness of realizing that sometimes love isn't enough to keep people close, that sometimes even family can turn away when it suits them. But in that sadness, there was also something else, a deep, growing strength, because, in losing their acceptance, I found something I had long forgotten: my own worth. I was no longer just a mother or a widow or a caretaker. I was Ellie's soul, resilient and deserving of respect. I thought of you, his steady hands and kind eyes. He had always believed in me, in us, and now I would believe in myself. The past could not be changed, but the future was mine to shape. I closed my eyes and let the silence wash over me, the silence I hadn't known. In years, no demands, no disappointments, no quiet betrayals, just peace. I reached for my journal and began to write, pouring out the memories, the hopes, the pain. Writing wasn't about forgetting. It was about understanding. Understanding that growth often comes from the hardest wounds, that sometimes to find yourself, you have to lose everything else. And in that loss, there is room for healing, for new beginnings, for a life lived on your own terms. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step into whatever came next, not as someone broken, but as someone reborn. The day I moved into the small apartment by the sea, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. It wasn't grand or perfect, but it was mine, quiet, filled with light, and wrapped in the gentle sound of waves beyond the window. I carried with me only what was essential: Johannes's photo, my red folder, a few clothes, and a heart finally ready to heal. The sun streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns on the wooden floor. For the first time, I could breathe without the weight of past betrayals pressing down. There was no yelling, no slammed doors, no biting words, just peace. I took slow walks along the harbor, greeted strangers with shy smiles, and began to fill my days with simple joys. I joined a small art class, where the teacher, an elderly man with twinkling eyes, told me my paintings spoke of strength and healing. I smiled, knowing that each brushstroke was a step forward away from the pain, toward hope. Messages from the past faded into the background, replaced by moments of stillness and self-discovery. Luca's and Maria's voices became distant echoes I no longer needed to answer. I knew they were lost in their own struggles, just as I had been in mine. One evening, as I watched the sun sink beneath the horizon, I felt the truth settle deep inside me. Family is not always the people who share your blood. Sometimes, family is the courage to stand alone. Sometimes, family is the strength to say goodbye. And sometimes, family is the grace to forgive not for their sake, but for your own. I don't know what happened to Lucas and Maria after that storm. Maybe they learned, maybe they did not, but I do know this: I am here, hold out stronger, and finally free. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you fight, forgive, or walk away? I invite you to share your thoughts, your stories, your strength, because sometimes the hardest battles teach us the most about who we really are. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, there are more like it, waiting, stories of resilience, love, and hope. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to hear them all. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember, your story matters.